Good morning, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and we're going to take you through Q's session from this morning. She starts off here with a little bit of Piaf, and this is really becoming very beautiful. Takes her a moment to get into it, but watch how she begins to lower those hocks a bit. Really gets active. Notice how her neck is staying up now really nicely. She starts to lower her hindquarters really regular, and that's all we're looking for. And notice how relaxed she was when that was finished. That's how it should always be. If your horse is a nervous wreck after Piaf, you're not doing it correctly. Couldn't be happier with the way this horse is developing. Today we even see some more visual cues that things are all going in the right direction, so to speak, and things you should be looking at as you begin to learn to watch how horses develop. Now notice how she walks right out of the blocks here into a really beautiful working walk. Notice the engagement of the top line of her neck, and what I noticed today for the first time is her neck and withers. You can see her neck is coming out higher out of her neck. She used to be a horse that never wanted to bring her neck up from the ground. But now we're seeing that really beginning to develop, and that's exactly how it works. If you pull the head up too soon, the back just drops and never comes into the position. There's a perfect working walk for her right there. And notice how she's staying. She was always curling behind the bit. Notice how she's staying up all the time. The steps are coming forward from behind, which means the impulsion is increasing. Remember, impulsion is energy that you have at your disposal to create movement. Nervous energy is not impulsion. That, unfortunately, many people today have mistaken a nervous horse for being an impulsed horse. If a horse is nervous, it's not impulsed at all. Impulsion is something that is relaxed. It's energy moving through the body of the horse that you can control. That can only happen when the horse is correctly developed, given the time for their spine to develop correctly, withers to move up into the correct position. Really nice in that shoulder in this morning. I know she got a little bit short maybe by the end of that, so Karen decided to bring her back into a stretch again. And this is the first stretch, but she walked out of those blocks so beautifully. We generally tend to want to start in a stretch, but when you walk out of the block just like that and she's ready to go, well, we let her have that for a minute. If we feel like it's starting to slow a little bit, which is very normal, and just put her back in the stretch again. Once again, notice how nicely she comes up and lets that energy move through her body again. Here, once again, Karen's doing a shoulder in. Look how nice the rhythm is. The hind legs continue to step forward, and that's what we're looking for. If you go into a shoulder in and the hind leg stops, yet you still continue to force the horse in a sideward position, you're not really achieving anything at all. It's only when they can step through with some degree of rhythm. Now, Karen is working on half pass here. We're not expecting, it's always been very difficult for her, so that's pretty good. Now, we want her ultimately to step much more through, but for her, that was a good beginning. That's we almost have to think about what can we get today correctly and not try to force it to be better than it is possible. Because when we do this, once again, when you force horses, all they do is get nervous and stiff. I was watching some of the horses at the last World Cup that they couldn't even barely get into the ring and they completely freaked out in the ring. Well, that shows you that horse has no trust of its rider whatsoever. When horses trust us, then they do the things we ask without difficulty. Not to say that any horse may get spooked at something, but when they completely have a meltdown, it's usually because they've been held in place for a long time and forced to do things. Remember that a horse that's been forced is always looking for a way out of everything that you're asking it to do. And when they find the ability to do it. In other words, someone gets in the ring where they can't whip the hell out of the horse, the horse quickly realizes it and does what it wants to do. Really nice shoulder in here. And once again, she's asking for the half pass, and she steps over a little better. Remember, this is the first movement that the horse moves into the direction of the bend and has to hold its back up. So it's quite difficult. It's always been a difficult thing for her, but that's coming quite nicely for her. But notice we don't ask for a lot of it, and after we do it, you can see how the hind leg started to shorten up. We just come right back to the stretch and open her up again. And how nice. Watch how Karen stretched herself up and the horse just came right underneath her into that frame. Really nice transition into a working trot. Once again, the thing to really notice with this horse is how much shorter her back is starting to look. She always used to look like a freight train. But her base of support now that her back is able to lift and maintain position, and she can maintain impulsion, she can stay up there. Now Karen does a little bit of a lengthening stride. Look how nicely that begins to swing forward there, opens up a little bit. We're never asking for the biggest thing the horse can do, but what we can do correctly. So if we can only get a small lengthening, is better than trying to force a big one and getting the horse just running. Look how beautifully, once again, take a look at that neck position. We're seeing a difference in her head and neck there. A great deal. As that neck is beginning to come out of the shoulders much higher. Really nice. Look at the muscular development across the top line of her neck and how completely relaxed the underside is there. Again, she goes for a little bit of a lengthening stride. Does that beautifully. Again, she asks for a little bit of a lengthening. Really nice. She listens to her seat beautifully in that downwards transition right there. Now it's a very hot day, so we're moving through things here rather rapidly, which is what you always have to do. We always have to consider the temperature and how much we can ask a horse to do on a given day. Really nice working walk, but how completely steady and consistent that is now. And you see when she wants to dip a little bit, see how Karen raises her hands. Hardest thing with horses that have been broken over the neck, because you can't take any backwards tension or they just flex over in the neck. And it always takes a few years to correct that. But really nice into this canter transition. And we see some things today that we've never seen before. This canter is really starting to look uphill. This is a beautiful working canter this morning. Okay, and you see how Karen just brought her hands up and that brought the horse up in front of the vertical a little bit. That's all she had to do. But how nicely she's staying lifted through the withers here in the canter. See how she wants to overbend a little bit, so that's what Karen's doing there. She's just to bring her back up and let that neck back out. Watch this lengthening, and we've never seen her do lengthenings like this before, really coming through. And notice how she kept herself lifted through those withers throughout that entire lengthening. And she's about to do a flying change here. Nice and through. This side was always a little bit more difficult for her. You can see the canter isn't quite as picture perfect as it was in the other direction, but not bad. Wants to drop a little bit more in this direction. And again, look her come through in this lengthening. All right, nice. Really nice big canter. And again, she's about to do a flying change here. Watch how nice and completely she comes through. Boom, and right through. Very nice. And that was really, really clean in that direction. Really nice. By the way, this is the new Art to Ride saddle that Karen's riding in here that we designed. It's pretty incredible. I think it's putting her in an incredibly good position. And one of the features of this saddle, notice when she goes by, if you can see, it has these really high upper blocks, which are very much like the blocks on an Australian stock saddle or a traditional classical dressage saddle that would have been ridden in the Spanish riding school. They always had these wings kind of that come up that give you some support should the horse buck or whatever. But they're not in the way of your leg. So the idea designing these was especially for people with short legs. Like if your legs don't come all the way down around the side of a horse and below the break of the side of the horse, you have nothing really keeping you on. So sure, people with short legs on very big horses, horse gives a buck and they go flying off because there's nothing really holding them on. Really nice lengthening after that. Wanted to get a little uneven there, but Karen steadied it really nicely. Beautiful working trot sitting now. And beautifully back to the walk. And halt for her. She was always a horse that was, her mouth was very, very difficult for a very long time. Karen's actually catching her breath right there. She just got over having COVID. So that's why she's standing there so long, trying to catch her own breath on a warm morning. She's just working on doing a few halts there from the walk. Notice how she lifted her hands as she started to drop behind the bridle there a little bit. Karen's going to do a little rein back here. So she's getting ready to do 2, 3. She's stepping back in diagonal pairs. So really that's quite nice. She stops the rein back by just stretching up like that and moves it forward again. And back into a really nice working trot again. Just working a few transitions. So we've already done the biggest part of the work with her. So now we're seeing where we can go from here. And she's starting to get a little bit tired. You can see how Karen's working a little harder to keep her from overbending, which tells us that she's starting to get a little tired and wanting to lug down a little bit. So once again, that looks how Karen just keeps her hands up, never backwards. And she gets a nice lengthening there again. Small one. So we can see that she's getting a little heavy in her hand and she's getting a little less, the desire to come through behind is getting a little less. So we know that we're getting near the end of the workout with her. So instead of trying to force that, We're going to do a few more movements, and then we're going to come right back to the stretch. Is what we're going to do here. So we felt like we had gotten really some of the best stuff we've ever gotten out of her. Those lengthenings, the canter were incredible. The canter itself was incredible. Really nice working trot, some lengthenings of stride. And then we started to feel like she's getting a little tired, and we started lugging down. So we're just going to come back and do the stretch. Remember, bringing the blood back into the muscles so she'll be ready to go the next time. One of the biggest problems I see with every time, when horses, people are not recognizing when horses get tired, and then they start trying to force what they're doing. And when you do that, nothing good ever comes of it. Back to a nice working trot there again. And then we're going to go back into the stretch. Once again, we felt like that was about all there was there. So notice that as she got a little tired, we do the stretches more often. As long as the horse is swinging through in that stretch, you're still building muscle that you're going to be able to use the next time you ride. So many people have this idea that if you're not keeping the horse, chin pulled to its chest and forcing all this activity to their back end, that they're not developing. But nothing further from the truth, because when you develop horses like that, they don't really develop. They drop their backs out from under you, and all kinds of other problems begin to happen. And you never really see that beautiful, slow, relaxed kind of movement that's connected that we want to see with horses. That is the hallmark of really great dressage. It's never a spectacle of activity, so to speak, which is kind of what we see dressage fallen into now. People just nothing but buying these very expensive horses that have exaggerated movements and then pulling them into some kind of phony frame where the front legs are just throwing out in front of them. So here we're just letting her come down and walk. And that was an absolutely beautiful workout with her this morning. I couldn't be happier with what we're seeing. So she gave us some of the best work we've seen yet, stayed up, and then once again, as we saw her get tired, we gave her the benefit of the doubt, come back to the stretch, and as I said, the muscles that you develop here will be there for you next time. Notice how beautifully everything is developing up in Oregon, the property there. Haven't quite got the rails on the ring yet, but that won't be long. Karen's done an amazing job up there. And once again, it's so important that we come back to this nice working walk and a stretch when we're done. So where every horse should begin and where it should finish. Once again, you saw we brought her out of the blocks, but she was so perfectly in a working trot that we used that. But even that, she started to get a little tired, and we had to come back to the stretch there for a moment. So if it's there and it's easy, well, by all means, do it. But when you start to feel the horse tired and lug down onto the forehand, then you know it's time to give him a stretch and relax. So again, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride with Karen Loshba and Q this morning. Thanks for joining us. Once again, we couldn't be happier with the way this horse is starting to develop after so many years of so much difficulty with her. It's all starting to pay off. Never give up, never give in. That's my motto. If they're sound enough to work, you can keep improving them. Once again, have a wonderful day. Thank you again for watching.